Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to another Road Pilgrim car review. Today we have the all-new iX1 electric on review with us today. And I think this is a particularly interesting and exciting review for us in Singapore because up until now, most of the premium brands, like for example your BMWs, your Mercedes-Benz, your Audis, so on and so forth, most of the electric offerings have been pretty high-end premium options. It is only until now, with the launch of the iX1 and the iX2, that we do have something a little bit more mainstream and accessible for the general public to purchase. And of course, this is in anticipation for other mainstream options like the Audi Q4 e-tron that's coming out later on this year. So I think this is the juncture where EVs are really going to start coming into the mass market, and people who are looking for an EV and a premium option really do have something to look at. So without any further ado, let's jump into this review. But before we do all that, if you're a driver in Singapore, you're thinking about selling your used car for the best price possible or consigning it for the best price possible, be sure to check out the link in the description box below, because through those links we'll be able to provide you the best possible quote and valuation for your used car. In fact, we can also do an insurance renewal quote for you as well if you are in need of those services. It's free to inquire, so feel free to check out those links. Let's go. Alright, so jumping straight into the review, this is the exterior of the iX1, and as some of you might have noticed, it looks almost exactly like the regular X1 that we reviewed earlier on in the channel. But in any case, this is kind of the way that BMW have gone forward in terms of how they manage the architecture for the EVs and the current crop of petrol-powered cars. So a lot of the platforms are actually shared, all the way up to even the 5 Series. So the i5 and the 5 Series are actually sharing the same platform. Similarly, what you see with the iX1 and the X1 here. So in terms of exterior looks, in terms of architecture, space, dimensions, it's more or less the same. There are some minor differences, but not any that you would notice if nobody tells you. But just to get things going, the very obvious difference is obviously the absence of a physical front grille. So with the iX1, you do get a blanked out front grille. I do apologize for the leaves here. About an hour before we shot this review, it started to rain really heavily. But as you can see, this is a blanked out front grille. It is patterned, so visually, when you look at it, it isn't actually too jarring that there isn't a front grille. There does feel like there are physical elements to the front grille here. So actually, I think it actually looks quite, I would say good, but it actually looks, it doesn't look too dissimilar to the regular X1, so to speak. Overall, I think this is a rather good looking SUV, compact crossover, whatever you want to call it. Or in BMW speak it's a SAV, a sports activity vehicle. But these run on 18-inch wheels as standard. So these are the 18-inch wheels. I believe the rim selection, the styling is a little bit different from the standard X1 rim, but anyway, in terms of dimensions, these are pretty similar. I'm not entirely sure if these are run flats as standard, but they were a little bit firm on the drive. So you know, if you're not a fan of run flat tires, and if these do really turn out to be run flat tires, then you know, a simple tire swap should do the trick. But in any case, I think I digress a little bit. Just look at this color. So BMW Singapore have sort of chosen this, or BMW Asia have sort of chosen this as a hero color for the iX1, and I think it's a great choice of color. This is what they call San Marino green. And for those of you who are very keen on darker colored cars, the San Marino green does offer a sort of a blacked out feeling when you're driving around at night. But in the daytime, you've got this lovely dark green hue to it, which I think looks very premium and quite unique as well. Actually, you don't really see too many green cars around today. But going around the back, with the exception of the iX1 logo in the bottom left corner, actually most of the car looks pretty much the same. So I think what this does for consumers is that, you know, if you're in the market for a BMW in this segment, you really do have a very clear, or rather you don't really have to worry about the styling of the car, you know, electric versus petrol powered. You just need to decide which drivetrain you like better. The rest of the car is pretty much the same, and that is sort of the strategy that BMW has been going for. Whether you like it or not, that's a different story, but there are merits to this way of positioning their cars. But of course, I leave that up to you whether or not you like this kind of format, or whether you prefer the petrol options and the electric options to be completely different cars in the same way that maybe a Mercedes-Benz does it. But you know, like, enough about that. Let's jump into the car and take a look at the interior and see what the iX1 has to offer. Alright guys, so welcome to the cabin of the BMW iX1. And for those of you who are familiar with the BMW platforms or the architecture of the latest crop of BMWs, you'll find that this feels very familiar because it's pretty much the same as what you would get in a regular X1. So no surprises there. But for the benefit of those who do not or are not familiar with the BMW X1 already, let's do a quick run through. So in terms of infotainment unit and touchscreen, in terms of the infotainment unit and the digital drivers cluster, this is exactly the same. It runs OS 8. Let me see. It is a little bit of a smaller integrated curve display than you would get in other BMWs, especially those of a higher end. So for example, your i4s, your i5s, those do have larger integrated curve displays, but this one does have a more compact one. I actually think this one looks better actually, and it doesn't have the sharp edge that you get on the other infotainment units, which I kind of like. This does feel a little bit more integrated, a little less retrofitted, so to speak. Not that the other systems are retrofitted, but this one just feels a little bit more in line with the rest of the cars, the design. Now, being iX1, this is definitely a younger feeling car. So in terms of trim, you've got some almost like a brushed metal finish here on the dashboard. You've got a lot more chrome or matte chrome trim as opposed to things like wood or leather. But nonetheless, if you touch the dashboard, these are still leather dashboards and they are stitched. So that definitely puts it in a certain echelon of cars where a little bit more premium, so to speak. You know, you're not looking at the hard plastics or things like that. This is actually a stitched leather dashboard. Now, moving down to the center console, it's quite a busy place here. You've got cup holders, wireless charging port, and then you've got actually a huge amount of storage underneath as well. You've got more USB ports at the front, and then your center console here is actually sort of floating, and it actually houses your drive selector, your volume control, and some of your so to speak express buttons, things like your mode selection and things like that. What I do kind of like about this center console is that your hazard lights are actually located here, which I think makes a lot of sense as compared to some other cars in the market, like for example like a Tesla Model 3 where your hazard lights are up here. I think it makes no sense at all. This is something you press in an emergency when you need to kind of pull up or stop, so it does make a lot of sense that it's near to you. Driving adjustments are actually pretty good in this car. You do have quite a varying amount of driving adjustment. My body is long, or my torso is long, so I tend to sit pretty low in the car. But if you do prefer to sit higher in the car, there is more than enough space and adjustment for you to do so. Steering wheel is pretty much standard as what you will find in this current crop of BMWs. Nothing special there, but it does have a very nice girth, very premium feel, so to speak. So I would say no complaints in the car. One of the things I absolutely love is the seats. If you're a little bit skinnier than I am, I'm not sure how much the seats actually hug you, but for my size, the side bolsters here do a really nice and excellent job at hugging your torso right along the sides here, and somehow that just makes you feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more secure, so to speak. I really do enjoy that. But enough about front passenger comfort. Let's jump into the rear of the car and check out the features of the rear, the second row of the car, and see how that fares. Alright, so welcome to the rear of the BMW iX1, and as you can see, the armrest has been put down. My daughter has been using this over the last weekend, so pretty useful for her when she's taking her naps, I must say. But in any case, this is the rear of the car. This driver's seat has been set to my regular driving position. I am 175 meters tall, and this is the amount of legroom that I have. Headroom is actually pretty good. I would say there's quite a lot of headroom, and I'm already sitting quite upright. So if I were to take a more relaxed seating position, I would have even more headroom and still a very reasonable amount of legroom. In fact, I think this isn't any worse, or this isn't actually worse than my 14-year-old BMW F10 5 Series. It's pretty similar actually in terms of the way amount of space that I have, and I think that really comes down to space utilization, especially with the new iX1 or X1 platform. I think what I realized as well in the iX1 is that space utilization has actually been improved greatly over the previous generation. I mean, not that there was a previous generation of the iX1, but the previous generation of the X1. This is definitely a larger feeling car on the inside, and I think that's really good, because this is the sort of car where I think every inch does matter. Young families are going to be utilizing cars like that, and if you have a young family yourself, I'm pretty sure you have thought about purchasing a compact SUV, something like the X1 or the iX1, because it offers you that elevated loading height, not too big a footprint, and of course still quite reasonable in terms of the amount of money you're going to spend purchasing the car as well. So I think all this is really great. You've got rear aircon vents, you've got USB ports, you've got rear netting, so everything that you need is here. The only thing that you don't have that you probably will want is built-in blinds, but as it stands today, most of the cars that have built-in blinds come in at a certain price point, so no complaints there. This is easily fixable with just one of those magnetic window blinds. Yeah, ISOFIX points come as standard as well as with most cars, so the car is actually all ready to ferry you and your little ones around. But enough about the rear seat and the rear space. Let's talk a little bit about the boot space actually, because typically in my F10, carrying 2 golf bags without removing the longer clubs can be a little bit of a challenge. But in the iX1, my wife and I have actually discovered that we can do that, and we can actually throw our our daughter's golf bag right on top as well. So essentially we are carrying 3 golf bags, or 2.5 golf bags, in a car that is as compact as the iX1. So I think that's pretty remarkable. But that said, let's jump back into the driver's seat and take the car for a drive and see how the car performs in Singapore's roads. Let's go. Alright guys, so welcome back to the cabin or the driver's seat of the BMW iX1, and we're gonna go take the car for a drive in a little bit, and I'll share with you my thoughts about driving the iX1. In fact, I've been driving it over the last weekend, so there are certain things that I've discovered about the car, but generally speaking, I do like the iX1 quite a lot. But in any case, before we get going, let's get some specifications out of the way first. So, in terms of horsepower, the iX1 is capable of about 148 horsepower, and this is good for about 250 Newton meters of torque. And BMW says that this will bring the iX1 from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 10.5 seconds. But in reality, this car feels a lot quicker. And I think the reason why the iX1 is sort of penned down for 10.5 seconds is also because a lot of the acceleration in a electric vehicle comes in the front end, and in fact the iX1 only has a top speed of 170 kilometers per hour, which might not sound a lot, but I guarantee you most of you viewing this would probably never even have driven at 170 kilometers per hour ever. So I think that's definitely more than enough. And in terms of cruising speeds, whether you're driving at about 80 kilometers per hour or 120 kilometers per hour, I don't think you're really going to feel the difference, or you're not going to feel like the car is out of breath. So no worries there, definitely enough power. But to illustrate what I mean, let's take the car for a drive. Generally speaking, I think cars or electric cars in this segment are quite interesting. Why? Because they tend to be compared against cars of the same segment, petrol powered variants of the same segment, which means they're being compared against cars that aren't particularly powerful. So at a higher level, say you're looking at a $400,000, $500,000 range, you are comparing fairly powerful EVs against fairly powerful petrol powered cars. So generally speaking, they're both powerful. They are both performing at a fairly high level. But at this slightly more entry level segment, a similarly priced petrol powered variant of a car is likely to be quite pedestrian and utilitarian in the way it is powered, which is why it's interesting, because an electric version offers you that much more amount of torque. In fact, so much more torque. And I know that 250 Newton meters of torque doesn't sound like a lot, but in reality, most cars in this segment are sitting at about 200 Newton meters of torque. So quite, it's definitely the amount of torque that you get in a car like that is definitely noticeable the moment you put your foot on the gas. I'm just waiting for the morning traffic to clear because it's crazy here on this service road. Probably chose the wrong road to do this review in a sense, but let's just see what happens here. So right off the bat, driving out from the car park to the gantry, steering weight is actually really light, and I mean this in a good way, because I think the demographics or the type of people who are looking to purchase a car like the iX1 probably want some element of the car being easy to drive, and I think lightness of the steering wheel is definitely one of the things that make a car very easy to drive, especially around car park speeds. Personally, I do own a E92 3 Series, and that's running on hydraulic steering, so around the car parks it can feel like a little bit of a chore because steering weight is so high. But in a car like the iX1, despite being slightly heavier than the regular X1, obviously because of the batteries, it feels really light on its feet. And coupled with the fact that it feels really light on its feet, the car also has quite a firm suspension setup. So it's not the most comfortable car and most wafty car out there. I'll just put it out there. I mean, and I think there's no shame in saying that as well, because this isn't the kind of car like a EQE, for example. It's a bit more sporty, it's a bit more young, it's a bit more dynamic. So suspension setup is also pretty firm, and it does give you a lot of confidence when you're kind of chucking the car around corners as well. I think, as with most BMWs, body roll and body control in the iX1 is actually pretty commendable. But you combine this with the lightness of the steering wheel, and the whole car just feels like a very, it feels like something that's very ready to go. It's not sloppy, it's actually very taut and very on the ball of its feet, so to say. Now, 250 Newton meters of torque. Once again, it might not seem like a lot, but in a traffic situation like that, it allows you to squeeze quite instantaneously and seamlessly into morning rush hour traffic. As you can see, there are quite a lot of cars around me. It's actually 8 o'clock in the morning right now, so everyone's just heading to work, and I'm reviewing a iX1. but yes, definitely, I think in this segment, 250 Newton meters of torque, I think it's a really nice sweet spot where the car feels brisk and powerful in a general sense. There's definitely more than enough power for you to squeeze into bits of traffic, and that's really important in a place like Singapore, because we don't have a lot of runway in between our expressway exits, so sometimes it's quite necessary to put on a burst of speed and just kind of take that lane and move forward with your day. But that being said, there isn't so much torque that you feel threatened or afraid, or you feel like the traction on the car is going to give out. No such thing. Everything feels quite good. So I think there is a really, really strong value proposition in the iX1 because, as I mentioned earlier on in the review, most of the electric offerings from your major premium mass market brands have been quite expensive so far. They've launched all their flagship models already, and now we're moving down into the more mass market group of consumers, or targeting the mass market group of consumers. So in terms of price, the iX1 actually sits in the mid 200,000s, and of course, this fluctuates depending on when you actually watch this review. At current pricing, at the time where we are shooting this review, it's about 260,000 thereabouts. So still a pricey car. It's not, I don't want to create any illusions that this is a affordable car, so to speak, but it is definitely more affordable than something that sits in the $300,000 and $400,000 range. And for all intents and purposes, it is pretty much the most affordable BMW electric vehicle you can purchase at the moment, with the exception of the i3. I think I'm not even sure whether the i3 is actually still on sale, but in terms of current crop of cars, this is probably the most affordable EV you can buy from BMW. So I think a lot of the people who have been considering going electric, they must have been faced with this dilemma of whether or not they want to splash the cash for a much more expensive, premium mass market or continental SUV or continental electric vehicle, so to speak, or go Japanese or Korean and pick up one of the options from those brands, because something like the Ioniq 6, for example, sedan, that would probably cost a little bit more than $200,000 right now. So probably a good like $40,000-$50,000 cheaper than a car like the iX1. But there is a real comparison here now, because previously we didn't even have this option of the iX1, and now we do. So there is quite a lot to be said about the choices that the iX1 brings to the general consumer who is looking to kind of move into, they want the premium brand, they want the EV, but so far they haven't really had very real affordable options. So this is one of them. And I really can't tell you how much I enjoy the iX1, because truthfully, it's a wonderful car to just drive around town. And over the weekend, it was perfect. We went really far away to play some golf. We took the car, run our errands, and everything turned out really well. The car was comfortable enough for my kids to sleep, comfortable enough for us to feel relaxed. The car always felt like it was big enough, and it was comfortable enough and powerful enough. So really pleasant experience so far with the iX1. Now, there are a million things I could say about the BMW iX1, but unfortunately, I think that's just really too much to cover. If you have questions about the iX1, or you have some bits of information or insight that you wish to know, but I did not cover those points, please put those questions in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to answer those questions when we have some time. And if you have enjoyed this review, or you have found it useful in some way, be sure to consider liking this video, sharing it with your friends, and of course please subscribe to the channel, because that's going to be extremely useful for us. Please subscribe to the channel, because the more subscribers we have, the better and quicker the cars we can get. So that's something that we really look forward to doing with you guys, because we've got reviews coming out every single week. In fact, this is a pretty busy period. Sometimes we've got 2 cars a week, so it would be wonderful if you could join us for those reviews as well. Alright, before we go, if you are a driver in Singapore and you are looking to sell your used car or consign it for the best price possible, be sure to check out the link in the description box, because through those links we'll be able to provide you the best possible valuation and quote for your used car. In fact, if you need an insurance renewal quote, please also check out the other link in the description box, because we can also help you to source some of the best insurance quotes in Singapore and put them in a side-by-side comparison for you, the consumer, to take a look at. Very easy to look at, free to inquire. Yeah, and actually with that, as usual, please take care of yourself, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.